That's the spirit.
Thank you for having us. And I wanted to say a couple of things and then just turn it over to the team briefly. First, we took over under Health and Human Services, Veteran Services in July of 2012, asked by the Board of Commissioners to do so. At the time, it was 2 people. And we were very fortunate thereafter to hire Jerry Wilson, who is our lead Veteran Service officer today, has been with us continuously since then. But we're 2 FTE, and today I just want to highlight we are 4 FTE, and I'm actually going to let Christina introduce the rest of the team in a moment and talk about how we're organized. But we have 2 county veteran service officers, a peer outreach specialist, and office support. So we've doubled in size, small but mighty. And the other good news beyond the program growth and the quality of people we have doing the work is we are recently notified, but don't have it in our hands yet, the award notification for our Veterans Peer Outreach Position grant through the state. So that is the sustainability plan for Ed Howard's position. So we're happy to have that, even though we've had him on board. We've had him on board now since the summer, but we didn't have the full funds to sustain that position without competitively writing for this grant, and we were one of 3 counties in the state that have been notified received the award. So other than that, I just really wanted to allow the team to speak, and Christina Malai, who is our Administrative Services Manager, is also the Veterans Program Manager, more recent. But it was a great fit of her skills, interests, talents, and capacities, and also the physical location in the Kirby building. So I'll just turn it over to you and the team.
Yes, so I'll take about a minute and then let the people who are doing the valuable work for our community speak. I'm really proud to be their new manager and providing them some support in the work that they're doing. I know that our new physical location since April of 2018 at the Kirby building has done a lot to impact just the walk-in traffic that we can have as opposed to the Booth Bend location. So it's been really advantageous for us to be there. I know that us all connected to as a team really helped us support having us all in the same building. I'm really proud of having Ed and Carolyn now as a part of the team as well, because I know that it increases the touch points that we can have, whether it's out in the community and the work that Ed's doing, or it's Carolyn's coordination of some of our in-office activities. And I hope that she's providing Jerry and Claudia with the valuable support that they need in order to touch the lives of people. One of the key data points that I was really intrigued by, I know Jerry and I have touched base about this a couple of times, is that our average quarterly recoveries for some of our veterans claims in this fiscal year is about $235,000 a quarter. That's a lot of money that's coming back into the community and claims. It's really all to Jerry and Claudia's good work that they're doing. Some of the things, the last thing I'll say is one of the things that we've targeted as an effort for the coming year is to be able to relook at what we have on the website in terms of behavioral health resources for veterans and connections. And Jerry and Claudia all have great ideas about what we can do better to inform the community about some of the projects that are near and dear to our hearts, and we were just not messaging as effectively as we could. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Thank you. Well, it's been a journey. Here lately, because of the change in Medicaid, we have been getting inundated by Medicaid recipients and Medicaid people who are applying for Medicaid. Oregon is one of the very few states that is let Medicaid recipients get VA benefits. All the other states haven't caught on yet, haven't started doing it, but we have, and we have been just getting inundated. Probably 2 or 3 calls a day. People want to come in and ask about VA benefits, and we've been lucky enough to get them VA benefits, or we'll provide a letter saying, no, they're not eligible, so they can go ahead and get Medicaid. So that's been our trying time, and our workload is continuing to increase. I think the other day, I think it was last week, we seen like 12 people in one day, plus all the phone calls that we're getting. So we'll still continue to get calls from other counties as well, wanting to come over and see it, want to take advantage of our services, and we don't turn them away. Tell them, hey, if you come over, come on over, we'll take care of you, and hopefully get you squared away.
I'm Claudia. I'm one of the
veteran service officer is the newest one, so I'm very lucky. Got supported very well by, of course, Jerry, who's doing great training. I've actually been with the veterans for about 11 years or so, so I've been doing the work, but now it's been recognized, so thank you guys very much for the support. We've definitely seen a great increase in pension benefits, which are very, very lengthy. And it is, a lot of them are referred by senior services. And so, yeah, with us together, it's a lot more manageable. I'm very fortunate to have Jerry as a senior veteran service officer, where we could tag team on a lot of the claims, where I could ask questions. We have different ways of views. Obviously, law is you can interpret it in many different ways, and so luckily we can join heads together. But it's been great working together, and we supported everyone.
Thank you.
My name's Ed. Kind of wear a couple different hats up here. Been helping Jerry out a lot in the community by doing a lot more outreach for the veterans to gather up our homeless population, working with people in jail, our vets, so we can give them better resources when they're coming out to be more successful in society. So I see this as a win-win, and I thank you very much for letting me be a part of it.
And I'd just like to say one thing about homelessness. We try very hard to get veterans off the street and get them into a place so they can get out of the weather and get on with their life. And one of the major hurdles that we face is lack of housing in this county. I mean, I have a group that we meet once a month that comprise of the housing office, YCAP, the HUD-VASH people from VA, and we pool our resources together to try to say, well, can you take care of this person? Can I take this person? And try to get them, but there's no housing available. So I just wanted to make that note.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's difficult. It can be difficult, and like Jerry was saying, that some of our just a temporary stay, and then after that, and we're back out again.
Mhm.
So it's a huge problem across the way.
Well, Ed, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for what you're doing. But I wanted to ask, you talk about outreach and being able to touch base with veterans who are incarcerated or veterans who are perhaps living on the streets. Are they receptive to finding out what their benefits?
Once I make a start, build a relationship with them, once I can actually, get on that ground level with them, find that level playing field, the majority of them are. Some of them are not gonna be so welcoming to the VA or whatever. I have to dress a little different, but the majority of them are that I've ran across so far, and I'm working with the ACT team, the CAT team, belong to a bunch of different committees already, so we're just trying, if they want it, it's there. Some of the people didn't know, gentleman, homeless 20 years, found out that Jerry had set him up with a pension already, had medical coming to him, even had a food card that he didn't know that he had over $1,000 on it. He was eating it as a can. Got him an appointment for an apartment, so there's some great success happening here. And it was all part of the whole team here pulling together to make it happen.
I can
We were
attest.
just looking at the grant numbers because we did the grant together to continue Ed's position that we had started, and I believe at that time you had already worked with 45 unique individuals and has been in the jail regularly several times a week. So really, Ed, I'm so impressed how quickly you hit the ground. I mean, you were deployed out making contacts, and partly that's because Jerry and Claudia and others helped kind of guide you, but we connected him in with our behavioral health teams. That's the ACT team, the Assertive Community Treatment Team, and the CAT team, Crisis Assessment Triage treatment team that we have that does outreach with law enforcement, first responders. Just really, the need is there, so it didn't take long, but really getting you connected and then having hopefully as many successes as we can and continue to build on that.
think that's what I'd add quickly, is that I appreciate Ed and I, checking and touch base on a weekly basis, and he's always bringing new ideas about how we can increase or stratify our approach to the outreach, because it won't be a one-size-fits-all solution in order to reach the people in need. And so he's always got different ideas about engaging with the jail staff in the crisis. We're working with, they're starting a group that he just started that meets at Kirby on the first and third Thursdays of the month. Things like that.
More- Anybody's more than welcome to come to
Mm-hmm.
them. You don't have to be a veteran, so it's a process. We want the community to be a part of it.
And I can attest to your work. I have a friend who has, through you, received pension and health benefits through the VA, and it totally changed his life. Just like, yeah. So, thank you.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Silas and Jerry and Claudia, Ed and Christina. Appreciate the work you're doing, and
Mhm.
lives are changed, and that's a big deal. So thank you for all
Yeah,
your
thank you
work.
very much.
Appreciate it. It's nice to see you once in a while, Jerry. Jerry used to come by and visit, but he doesn't come by anymore.
Well, they keep moving me around.
Your space is so nice, too.
That's part of the strategy, right? Where's Jerry today? Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. On to our item A2, which is a swearing in of the county accountant and the deputy county accountants, and that's our clerk, Brian Van Bergen, and Gail Jensen is also here. Well,
Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
Where would you like to do this? Ken should probably be first, as Justin is serving today. All right. In front of the microphone, back of the microphone? You want to do it right here? I can just move the mic around. Will you be swearing or affirming? Oh. You can choose whether you want to swear or affirm. I can swear. Well, we're on the record. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I've got the good here.
It's the dramatic pause. All right. Having raised your right hand, please repeat this oath after me. I, Kenneth Huffer,
I, Kenneth Huffer,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon
and the laws thereof.
and the laws thereof,
And I will faithfully and honestly
and that I will faithfully and honestly
demean myself
demean myself
in the office
in the office
of county accountant,
of county accountant,
to which I have this day
to which I have this day
been appointed,
been appointed,
and perform such duties
and perform such duties
as county accountant
as county accountant
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
I will finish that and get that over.
It's official, Ken.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you,
Good time,
Ken.
Justin.
Thanks, Brian.
It was much easier. Last time I was sworn in, I had my head shaved, and I spent 3 months in boot camp.
I was just well, we haven't started that yet.
Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
And is Mike going to be sworn in?
Mike is not here this week.
Okay.
We'll try that next week. If you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Justin Hope,
I, Justin Hogue,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support that I will support
and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon
and the laws thereof.
and the laws thereof.
And I will faithfully
And I will faithfully
and honestly
and honestly
demean myself
demean myself
in the office of Deputy County Accountant,
in the office of Deputy County Accountant,
to which I have this day
to which I have this day
been appointed,
been appointed,
and perform such duties
and perform such duties
as such Deputy County Accountant,
as such Deputy County Accountant,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Justin. Well, Brian, since you're here,
Yes.
we figured we'd talk about the tally system before you got too far away.
Okay.
So during this part of the work session, we're going to talk about the tally system that we started talking about last time, but maybe you can give us a little bit more information, bring us up to speed where we left off, and then we'll have some more questions.
In 2017, we got super close to finalizing the transition from our first electronic vote tally system. In 2006, using a significant portion of federal dollars, folks call HAVA dollars, or Help America Vote Act dollars, our first system went live in 2006. In 2017, we initiated a request for proposal and subsequent testing and went through the process of selecting one of 3 systems that are certified for use in Oregon. The system that had been at that time been in use in most of the counties in Oregon was from a system called ES&S, or election whatever and whatever, and we were using HART, InterCivics software, and the third was a newcomer by the name of Clear Ballot. Clear Ballot is the software we chose to move forward with. Finalized that in 2018. Our first election with Clear Ballot was the primary of 2018. We've since run an election both as a primary and a general. Both the May 2018 and the November 2018 elections were done solely on this new system with Clear Ballot. We were, I believe, the 12th or 13th county in Oregon to launch with Clear Ballot. So today, as we sit, there are 2 counties in Oregon left with a HART system, 14 counties with Clear Ballot, and the rest are still with ES&S. If you roll back the clock a little bit to why we chose Clear Ballot over the other 2, the first answer, moving ES&S off the table, was an easy one purely based on cost. Our 10-year total cost of ownership for ES&S would have been just south of $2 million. The other 2 were both in the $500,000 to $600,000 range. So it was an easy choice to eliminate one of the three options and then focus on either clear ballot or Hart. One of the reasons we went with clear ballot over Hart is Hart was making a transition to a new system, and their price was $100,000 more than clear ballot. So we were facing two new systems. Both our provider and clear ballot were launching new systems at the same time. We went through a competitive process of analyzing all sorts of aspects to all of the interactions we have with the vote tally system. Cost was one of the points of analysis. Feedback from their sales and admin was another source. The ease of creating ballots, the look of the finished piece to the voter and the results to the general public. When we graded, we had a number of people grade each of the systems. Clear ballots winning values were primarily based on a couple of bits. One was they were still cheaper, and another was Hart had not been proven with their new system locally, and that's one of the things that Mary alluded to at our last gathering is, well, why do you want to go with this other outfit? Because they had problems too. And one of the things that we had talked about the last time we talked was, well, what do the other counties say today? What would they say if our neighbors were to choose today a new system? And we've had that conversation with a couple of our neighbors, and each one of them, whether they're clear ballot or Hart, would choose that same program again today. So our neighbors to the north, Washington County, significantly larger than we are, 250,000, 300,000 voters, and we're just 70,000 voters. They're clear ballot users, and they're pleased as much. Both Clackamas and Marion counties are Hart customers, and both had rough starts. Both Clackamas County and Marion County had several ripples in their first couple of elections with the Hart system. So nothing's perfect out there. One of the other questions that we came up with the last time we met was, well, what are the failures in the clear ballot system, and are they large enough failures to justify moving? One of the questions that was raised for Christian and myself was there a breach in contract? Is there something substantial enough to warrant getting money back from clear ballot? I don't believe their failures are or have reached that level. I believe that they have provided what they say they would, which is the ability to create a ballot, present that ballot to a voter, receive that ballot, and display accurate results. So clear ballot is doing all of those things that it's required to do, and it's doing that well. What the real difference is, in the best way I can describe it, is at the time we thought we were choosing between a Chevrolet and a Cadillac. And at the time, that's really what we were looking at, is a product that was very good but priced that way. That's Hart's value was, their value proposition was, we know what we're doing, we have a product that works, and you're going to pay for it. Clear ballot was coming to the scene saying, we've got a product that works, and we don't charge as much. And that is still true. Really, most of what we've seen over the last year impacts our office behind the scenes, doesn't impact a voter, a candidate, or someone looking for finished results, unless you're really interested in the minutia. One thing that, if you looked at our results, some of the result documents in particular, you'll see are heavily weighted towards including every bit of data that's possible. So this document, you can barely see, I'm sure, from where you're sitting, but this is a report of the precinct committee people's election results from May of 2018. And the first half of each page is just listing all the precincts that are included in the report. And there is currently no way in Clear Ballot to get rid of that header. And that won't be fixed for another 2 rounds of updates.
Why is that such an issue?
That is an issue in a list of issues. One of the things that indicates is there is a lot of work to be done, and we need to figure, when will those other issues be fixed? How long will it take to fix those issues? The most recent set of updates were promised to us in December of 2018. The latest update is we now won't see those updates until February of 2019 at the earliest, which is when we build our next election. So if they miss that, we won't be able to update our version until after this election. So we will miss yet another election and go through a number of these really nuanced problems until after that's done. And again, it's not something that will impact a voter's ballot. It's not something that will change the results. It's really just impacting our office. So what is bringing me before the board today is the notion that the Cadillac that was offered to us a year ago at a Cadillac price has been brought back before us for the Yugo price. So Hart has come back to the table and said to us, for the price that Clear Ballot is going to charge you every year for the next 10 years, we will offer our product to you for that same price without the $150,000 purchase price. So we have before us an opportunity to get the Cadillac for the Yugo price. So there is a lot of detail that needs to be ironed out. One thing that we want to find out before we get too carried away is your level of pain or conundrum, or does the process of going back worry you so much that we shouldn't even talk further? Or do you think it's a viable enough option? Should we dive deeper and actually secure the written proposal and send that new proposal over to Christian for review? At the moment, all we have is a phone call from the vice president at Hart saying, we're going to do this for that price. We don't have anything in writing yet. So we wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with that discussion before we went there. But one of the other questions that came up last time is, would our neighbors entertain a discussion? I have both a commitment from Washington County, Marion County, and Clackamas to have their users talk to you. The question then is just, did you want them to appear here? Did you want them just to answer a phone call? The question then really is, how do you want that the interaction to happen?
I don't know that they necessarily have to come here. You recognize that everybody's busy, and to ask them to come from their county duties to come here when we could either have a conference call during an informal session or answer a number of questions by email, which again is time-consuming to have someone answer a question on email. Maybe we've done this before with a county commissioner in Tillamook County regarding the transit lodging tax. We had him by phone during an informal, and it was a great way for the commissioners to ask some questions. So maybe we could consider setting that up for consecutively on an informal date to ask questions, and by then we'd have an opportunity to really get an idea of what we'd like to know. And then maybe talk to Christian about just sort of the nuts and bolts of what this contract would mean. And then we also need to look at the dollar signs at the end of any discussion.
Now, Madam Chair, another issue too is I believe we need to go through a competitive procurement process, which would mean crafting an RFP, releasing an RFP, receiving proposals, evaluating proposals, and then after that, if the decision was to move forward with one of those proposers, then make that decision at that time. Because I'm not aware of another. The way we did this last time is we piggybacked on, I believe it was Marion counties.
The last time was Multnomah County?
Multnomah counties. More recent RFP for Clear Ballot. Are we aware of another one?
There is debate about that since it is election-related. Since it's an election-related procurement, there is debate whether or not we need to go out. But there is Clackamas County that I have, but I didn't bring it because it's 370 pages long. So I'd be happy to share that, and Sherry, their clerk, says that it does include that content. So we'll see if it meets the time.
Others can piggyback? Oh, okay. Well, if that's still in effect and an option, then we might be able to utilize that.
I don't have Marion counties yet, but Clackamas I do have, and it's.
Save some time.
So we can look at those things.
I would be interested in us moving forward and continuing the conversation, since you asked.
So why don't we do this, and that is, we can set a date for, what should we say, 3 weeks? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to be able to get everybody to join by conference call. Also take a look, have Christian be able to take a look at that Multnomah County contract.
Yeah, we can answer those procurement questions by then.
Yeah. Is 3 weeks, 2 weeks?
Totally. 2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks,
And that-
3 weeks,
Either, whatever works. Either works.
Tuesday
for
the
board.
29th?
sold. No.
So maybe we can see if they're available.
Okay.
So do you want to do that, Brian? Talk to them and see if they could join us at 1:30, 1:45, and 2 o'clock on the 29th?
On the 29th?
And that would give us just ballpark, so they'd know 15 minutes each, you think? To just go over the same questions.
I think we have speakers in here. But
Does it work here in room 32 to have a
Conference call? Yeah.
conference call?
Yep.
Perfect.
I have to say, that it is still the month of January. I am technically still on jury duty for January, so unless I get called for jury duty, I would be here.
Okay.
Well,
Third to last.
Do you want to wait? A week after that, so that we don't have?
you want to go February 5th?
Why don't we do that, so we don't have
Okay.
a question of that? Does that
Does
make
that
sense?
work or not?
I will be in Bend. Sorry.
Yeah, we can't have you calling in as well. No.
Probably not.
So do you want to go with the 29th?
29th?
And then hope that Christian doesn't
Take a
get
little
called for
risk.
jury duty?
Small
Okay.
risk.
I like it.
And if I can't be here, Todd can attend, and I can certainly get information from him or Josephine, so.
Right.
it shouldn't
Sounds
be a
good.
problem.
Brian,
Okay,
thank you very
the
much.
29th.
Any other
Yeah,
questions?
thank you.
All right.
Thanks for giving me the update, too. I heard a little of it background, so.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
All righty. See you in a couple of weeks. So we can move on to item C, which is the preliminary consent agenda, which would be the minutes from November 27th, 2018, and December 13th, 2018, or rather informal session on the 27th of November, informal session on the 13th of December, and then also the approval of the following changes to the Yamhill County Foundation would be to reappoint John Larson to position number 2, to expire December 31st, 2021, and B, reappoint Gary Reuter to position number 6, term to expire December 31st, 2020. And is that okay? Are you all right, Commissioner, with them being on the consent agenda?
Yes,
Both
please.
those items? Okay, so those items will be on our consent agenda. The non-consent agenda items, which we'll discuss on Thursday, will be the discussion of the 2019 liaison responsibilities. Do we want to, at this point, have, since Silas is here?
I would love that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Silas, would that work for you now? We can talk about the agreement for the Sully construction and the two different proposals for the contracts for HHS. You want to do that?
And we also have Joe Moore here from
And Joe's here.
facilities to
Okay.
answer any questions that may come up.
So, this is a rough group. So we'll start with
And then we stepped back.
item
So that
D2,
too.
the consideration of the agreement between Yamhill County and Sully Construction for construction services for the 330, 340 Kirby Street property in the amount of $29,055. So maybe, Silas, you can start with what the purpose of the addition is.
These are tenant improvements, so one key thing to note, we do have a long-term lease on this building, 5-year with 2 additional 5-year terms, and we do foresee the business need to continue in this space for quite some time. The bid came back for 6 doorways. They're sort of archways that need to have a framed-in area plus a door for privacy. We're using the space even more thoroughly than we initially had thought. We have several people in some of those offices, so it's really allowing for a private and quiet workspace. One of the areas most impacted is the County Veteran Service Office, specifically the team that was here earlier, and Claudia would have more privacy to work on confidential matters with her office. So it's those 6 areas, 6 doorways. And then additionally, a cabinet and countertop and sink space. We do have a break room, but since the building office in totality covers 40-plus staff, it gets crowded at lunchtime and it's on the far end, so we think it is prudent to have a coffee machine and a little sink space. And luckily, there's plumbing in the wall, so it's really just bringing it in the other backside. And then the storage is currently, we have a cabinet that would just become part of the new countertop and cabinet altogether. So that's the space. We attempted 3 bids. We received 2. This was the lower bid. The Sully Construction we've worked with in the past. And he has also worked in this space specifically for, I think, about 10 years, maybe a little longer. He knows the building really well. He's easy to work with. And I'll let Joe add anything that I might have missed.
Yeah, it looks like you have lots of potential offices by the time you get those doors closed, so, or doors in. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did have an opportunity to tour the facility with our county administrator and at the time, Commissioner-elect and Commissioner Olson, because they had all expressed interest in seeing the building. So 4 of us toured it, and if you want to add anything else.
The kitchen is really nice, but it's far away. That was my takeaway from it. And it felt intrusive, as though I was walking through everybody else's spaces. So that was what my observation.
So do you have any other questions for Silas and Joe? Would you be okay with this being on our consent agenda?
I am okay with it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we'll move that item D2 to our consent agenda, preliminary consent agenda.
Preliminary.
And on to item D3, which is the consideration of accepting a bid from Andy Medcalf Construction Company for the Health and Human Services Tycor building remodel in the amount of $345,322. Silas?
I went first last time. You want to take this one, or you want me to keep going?
Okay.
So, this was part of the 18-19 CIP.
Capital improvement project list.
Yep.
The issue that
Thank you.
we're coming up against here is what was budgeted for the project. We had we combined 2 projects. We had the HVAC improvements that we wanted to do on the building. There's some use issues that Silas and his team have over there, so they want to remodel. The combined cost of this is more than what we had approved for the 18-19 CIP.
Mhm.
So we're coming, saying, hey, we after the RFP process on this, and we've got all the bids back, we're considerably higher than what was approved. So to move forward, we need to come to you and have you authorize us to add to the CIP that extra amount.
So now, would that extra amount, would that basically come from this year's capital improvement?
It would,
It would, and then that would just piggyback on what was allocated for last year's?
correct.
Okay.
So Ken, do you need the board to both increase?
That's what's in the request on the memo. It didn't make here, so it's
Yeah.
both, in the memo, it's both the request to
Mhm.
approve the project, but then also for the additional funds out of Fund 4027 to make up for those costs.
Yeah.
Then the other things you might want to highlight too, I mean, the HVAC system, this is an HVAC system that we've had a lot of issues with
Mhm. People have
over the
told
years.
me.
And so this is one that we've had targeted for replacement for some time. There's also been issues because of the zoning within that portion of the building. So having the remodel with the HVAC components, it goes hand in hand.
There's some controls issues with that as
Right.
well that we'll address at the same time.
Right. And then there was another thing I was going to say, and I just lost it.
Was
Well,
it related to the financing?
Well, and also some of the costs associated with this because of the nature of the work, because a lot of the, some of the drivers for the costs, it's also because a majority of the work has to be done after hours. Because, I mean, it's a very busy office over there, so
Yeah.
it's not something that we can just close off that portion of the building. There'll be times where we'll have to do that and come up, with displacing workers, especially with the overhead on the HVAC units, but, so maybe you guys want to talk about the programs or maybe some history with these rooms and what moving forward.
I think it's a good idea to give us some context as to why this is important.
Right.
Yeah. So in addition to the HVAC system, which there are 3 separate HVAC units that will be replaced, and it's much needed, this would create 12 office spaces in an area that today we don't have those individual private offices available. So we have done a lot of creative shared office spaces. Even in this particular area of the building, we have 2 what were classrooms or group rooms that have 7 or 5 staff, very tightly put into these rooms, but they still need confidential interview rooms to do one-on-one or maybe small family discussions. So essentially, the business need is for the adult behavioral health program, vulnerable population that we are serving in the community, and I do not anticipate the need changing dramatically in the near future for the office space. So really, it is the right time, I think. Probably it's several years overdue in terms of the HVAC. But to be doing the HVAC and setting the controls and the reconfiguring of the space, which is not that complicated, as Ken mentioned. It's more about how to get the work done while you're still using the space and make sure it's done safely and, with proper attention to the risks of having all the airborne, the stuff they do when they're mudding and taping and making all the dust and those kind of activities. But it's much needed from a business needs standpoint, and we are hoping that we can move forward despite the bid coming in higher than the budget. I will note that there were at least 3, if not 4 other bidders that were $100,000 to $150,000 more. I think the highest bid was just under $500,000, as I recall, but most of them were starting around $440,000 or $450,000.
Right.
So this is the low bid.
Okay.
There was one other thing on that too. I think we discussed how we were going to split up the cost on that. We settled on.
That's right. That's another important because,
I thought I saw it in there.
yeah.
I didn't see the memo, so I was actually just going to
It's in there.
Stay quiet in case you
It's
did
in the
wanna bring
memo.
it up.
So actually,
Yeah.
the gap is, we're splitting that with HHS, so they're going to use
Mhm.
departmental funds to also make up that difference.
It was like 94,000, and then whatever that remainder would be. That's my memory of it, something like that.
I didn't see the memo.
Okay. I'll trust me.
I know what is in my head, but perhaps, unless you need more information, I'm sure Ken covered in the memo.
I do have one more question, kind of about the space. Are you going to have those group rooms somewhere else?
Yes.
Because I know you have
so-
the modular, but
Mhm.
wasn't sure if that covered it.
Yep. The modular is not a forever
Mhm.
planned fixture on our property. We are finishing now the Davis, what we call the Davis Street remodel, which is
Right.
directly across the street on the Davis side, so
Mhm.
the west side of the Evans building.
Right.
And that's where the group rooms will be, although we are thinking of keeping the modular while we complete the renovation in this, what is the northeast corner of the Evans facility that Joe's been talking about, because we will have, at the very least, we will have the need for the space, if not for people, for equipment, as we're moving things around and in and out.
Right. The modular boat, right?
Yeah, the modular boat,
Yeah.
yeah, if it's not underwater.
Okay. So do we need two separate actions
There
for
was
this?
a big puddle.
Oh, there's a big.
It was in the middle of a puddle.
It's right on top of the gas basin.
Yeah. So it looked like it was in the,
I walked over and saw it the other day.
like, floating.
I had the guys cut a notch in this.
Ken, do we need two separate actions for this because of the split up of the funding, or is this something that can be approved just simply by putting this
By
on
moving it.
the preliminary consent agenda as is?
I could work with Carolina and update the language for that. Do you
Yeah,
think it's
it
two
probably
different
makes sense
actions?
to- I would say it makes sense to break them out, one item, they could both be on the consent agenda, so you approve
we
them
can
both
see
in
them,
one
yeah.
fell swoop, but
I
then
can
you
do
would
that.
see the increase. And then, I think to clarify, Joe and I briefly discussed this yesterday, what actually asking the board to do at this time is to authorize the notice of intent to award
Yes.
the
Correct.
contract to Andy Metcalf.
Yeah.
This was actually something that was handled for us by Randy Saunders, RSS Architecture. He
Right.
developed the plans and then handled the solicitation process. So
Okay.
we would do the notice of intent to award, have the 7-day protest period, and if that passed without incident, then the next step would be to bring the final contract back to the board again for
Correct.
consideration.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
Okay. All right. So if there are no other questions, would you be in agreement that we put this on our preliminary consent agenda?
am.
Okay. So that will go on to our preliminary consent agenda.
Thank you
Thank you,
for
Joe. Thank you, Silas.
explaining it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Way to wing it too, by the way.
Next is item D4, the consideration to submit a request for proposal for engineering services by OBEC Consulting Engineers for the Yamhill West Sider Trail pedestrian bridge project. And Christian, I just had a question about this in light of the remand. Where do these particular projects stand?
So to clarify too, it's not to consider the submission of a request for proposal, it would be to, again, consider authorizing a notice of intent to award
Yeah.
Correct.
to OBEC for these services. We've been through the RFP process. We did only receive one bid, but that would be the next step.
Yeah.
And then if the board chose to proceed with moving forward with this contract, then we would bring the contract back after that. Madam Chair, to your other question, it is and it isn't related. The trail is, as we all know, is a project with a lot of moving parts. The remand was back to the county for sort of reconsideration or some additional findings and following a slightly different land use process if we decide to move forward with the next step, which would be to schedule and hold a remand hearing, this time using quasi-judicial format as opposed to a legislative format. So there's that issue and those items there. This contract for engineering services would be the next step down the road of our Connect Oregon 6.
Correct.
grant.
This is part of the grant for the
And it can
the design of the
proceed-
bridges and
Yeah.
construction of one bridge, and, because we have grant timelines associated with that grant, we're proceeding with these steps. For this, we did the RFP closed, and so the intent of this is to proceed with a notice of intent to award, and
Simply, there is no prohibition to move forward with this because of the remand.
Okay.
There is no requirement to make this dependent on that. They are connected, as all of these things are, to the overall progress of the development of the trail. And I don't know if Ken or Carrie want or need to speak more about the timelines, but we would be looking to move this forward now to sort of try and keep the current timelines that we have for these grant funds with ODOT.
And this would be as similar as like with the previous project with capital. This is a notice of intent. We'd start working on the contract, and then the actual contract itself would also come back before the board.
Right.
Right. And the initial part of this would be the design, and then the same contractor would also facilitate the solicitation for the construction services and then oversee construction management.
Correct.
So that's what this contract would cover.
Okay. So did you have any other questions?
I didn't. Actually enjoyed reading the stuff that maybe Carrie, maybe Ken, put in the packet.
Oh.
So that was surprising to me that it was so enjoyable.
Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, so I would be in favor of leaving this on the non-consent agenda item for Thursday. And if that's okay with everybody, we'll move on to item D5.
Mm-hmm.
And that is discussion of considering an inclusivity proclamation. Commissioner?
That's right. So I was feeling like it was important for our community to, for the county to proclaim to our community that we are inclusive in all aspects. And so I reached out to a couple other elected officials, and the city of Dayton passed a very simple, strong inclusivity proclamation in April 2017. I believe that McMinnville and Newburgh have also passed them. And so I thought it was time for the county to do it. So I sent it to Caroline and Ken and Carrie, but I'm not sure if it actually, I didn't see it in the packet as of this morning.
I didn't make it into.
I have a copy of it somewhere, I just need to.
Oh.
I have a folded up copy here.
I've got one right
Okay.
here. Couple of things. It's listed as a resolution.
Right. It was labeled.
Proclamation?
Yeah, it was labeled as a resolution. I got it from the city of Dayton, but they called it a proclamation. And we talked a little bit about the difference between those.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what I'm happy to do is change the title to proclamation.
To proclamation?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should have some discussion about this. I would be in favor.
That sounds great.
Of putting this on keeping it on the non-consented agenda. I have a couple of thoughts about it. And would like to have this discussion. Maybe we can include Commissioner Olson in
Mhm.
some
I
of the
think we should.
discourse. So if we could keep that on the non-consent agenda. And also move on to item D6, the discussion of a formation of a task force to consider moving county offices out of downtown McMinnville. Commissioner, did you want to?
Yes, and Christian and Ken, it's funny, it's looking at you and saying Christian, talked a little bit about possible ways to move forward, and a suggestion was made that we provide the opportunity for a public hearing, provided that the rest of the board was open to that as a starting point. And I think you may have some more thoughts?
Yeah, the other thought that I have, because again, this was something that was approved by the board last year as part of the capital improvement plan, is we do have a facility needs assessment budgeted for on the capital project list. It was something that we've talked about, but we haven't initiated it because it just kind of made sense with the transition with Laura and I into new roles, that it'd be something to kick off in the new year. And that's going to help, one, it does, it's going to include an analysis of the current footprint and our current facilities, and then also, capture need and get some of that, looking at it from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
on our facilities, or existing facilities, and what the needs are, and then possibly projecting some, what future growth may look like and future needs. Part of that is going to be, I don't know what the price ultimately is gonna be, but there's a high probability it may require an RFP process, or at least we're gonna be soliciting a few quotes. I'll be working with Christian on that. You know, and that would help drive,
It could direct it.
you know, some of the discussions and, you know, to open up that time for having public comment on some of the ideas that come out of that, or, so, you know, or even as part of that, when we put together a scope of work, I'd like to schedule a work session with the board to start hammering out that scope of work. And I think that's gonna be one of the first steps.
Yeah.
Is looking at what this needs assessment, putting some boundaries around it, what all are we looking at, you know, because that's gonna drive what the total cost of the project is gonna be. So, you know, we have that identified, and maybe the kickoff for this type of discussion, it, you know, should maybe start with that project that we've already have on the agenda.
Right.
Because I know that you've been working on this for quite a while. This was something that was in your.
I'm formulating up here. It
Right.
hasn't necessarily transitioned into paper yet. so, yeah.
But to your point about the cost of this, there's not an insignificant cost to looking at that, to making those recommendations. So
Mhm.
what I would suggest is that we do that part first and have that to inform a next step.
Right.
So that a task force, I don't know that we need a task force, but I think we need the information
Mhm.
to tell us where we're at.
We certainly
And
do.
then I also think that it is up to the board to make those decisions as to whether or not this would be something. So let's say the information comes out where the needs assessment shows us that we would have great space needs that we can't accommodate with what we have, then we have to look at the next steps, and would that be something that we would ask the voters if they wanted to pay for? But I do think that the Board of Commissioners is tasked with making these types of decisions, and I don't know that a task force is necessarily necessary, but I would just like to start with the information.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about the difference between an external and an internal collaboration, a gathering of people too, because we don't necessarily need to, we don't have to immediately go out to the public, because there's lots of voices within the county government that need to weigh in, for sure. But then we have a lot of resources, I say out there, but then, you know, beyond the walls of this building, who also can share their expertise. But that's where a public hearing would come in very handy, is to provide those voices of, no, we should stay in because I have this experience with tax policy, or with HUD funds, or, yeah.
So at this point, do you want to, so we would leave this on the non-consent agenda if,
Right.
at this juncture?
Right.
And then we can, what would be a timeline for us to maybe, you know, in a few weeks, be able to look at what an RFQ would look like? I'm guessing that's what we're going to need to do next.
Well, what I'd like to do, because I have already started reaching out and I'm getting some examples of some previous ones,
Right.
including ones that we have done in the past. And of course, working with Joe and Justin, you know, to start maybe at least putting some ideas on paper that we could come back to the board and
Right.
have a talk about scope of work in developing, you know, what this project's gonna look like. It might be worth, I'm thinking, you know, I'd like to have a few weeks, you know, with
Mhm.
everything else that we have going on, also keeping in mind that we're just kicked off budget season right now. I don't know if we found a date in February, would that be okay with the board
Toward
to
the
schedule
latter
a
part?
work session?
Toward
Yeah.
the latter part of
Mhm.
February, to give you some time to
Mhm.
Right,
put
That
all
sounds
that
great to
together?
me.
Does that is that something you can comfortably do?
right.
Or would you like
We could
maybe
do that. And if
another
I'm
week?
hearing consensus that we want to schedule a work session on this topic, and then Justin and I will get to work on this and have something towards the end of February.
That sounds great.
Okay, great.
And then as far as with this being an agenda item, did you still want to keep this for a discussion, or, you know?
I know that Rick wants to talk about it.
Okay.
And, yeah, so.
Okay.
If we can keep it on there so that he has an opportunity to weigh in as well.
So keep that on the non-consent agenda item
Sounds
as
good.
well. Okay, thank you. We don't have an executive session, but commissioner updates. So Commissioner, we'll start with you. Your first week in office?
And what I even I took notes at RIAC, and I thought that I'd give a really brief summary of what we talked about at RIAC, because
Okay.
it was a wide-ranging conversation.
All righty.
Let me get to that page. And then I doubled up with a staff meeting this morning at Public Works, which went over a lot of the same territory.
Okay.
The new Public Works building, they're hoping to be in really any time. So that's the real obvious one.
That's good.
The De Jong Bridge, the expectation is that it'll be open February 5th. Bernert Towing is starting to talk with the county, with Public Works. They want to start opening the approved quarry site on Grand Island. So they have a conversation, I think possibly it even involves Christian, about their portion of contribution to improving the road. We talked about the Laughlin Bridge, but we've been in here for formal session when he presented, so. There's another blue sign kiosk coming up at what's called Dewey's Corners, which I confess I had never heard
Where
of
is that?
before. It's at the corner of Laughlin and Anderson, if that helps. If you go up Laughlin Road to the very end of it, that's where Dewey's Corner is. Yes. And they have money for this one, that one, and then their next step will be at Mineral Springs Road, intersection with Hendricks. And that program is self-funded, is what I was reminded of. I asked about improvements to North Valley Road for safety for bicyclists, and I was told that bicycles are not allowed. That was a quote from somebody. Yes. Let's see. There's an interest. There were 3 applicants to be on RIAC who were present for the meeting, and there were 2 more who were not able to make it. And so there's 5 applicants for 2 positions. And so John, Director Phelan, is interested in changing the policy to increase the size of RIAC, because there's very skilled, experienced, diversity of experiences candidates there. So that was something that they're going to talk about some more. One thing that was interesting is that was on Friday, I believe. Well,
Thursday night.
It was Thursday night. Thank you. The days are blending, but we had our meeting hearing on the gate. I keep calling it a trail. And then they brought up that they would be. This was just among the group. I swear that I was not talking. That they wanted to develop a policy for gate permits going forward. And I thought that was kind of funny timing, since none of them were present. They're working on MIP right now, so the major improvement projects. Is that what we got? Yeah. And so they're trying to finalize that right now.
Right.
The biggest one that's uncertain is whether to repave, overlay North Valley Road. There's like 5 miles of it, but it's in relatively decent shape. So, and then Bill Gilly is done at the end of June, and so they're starting the process of considering what the county engineer role is going to be, and he's going to come before us to find out how to do the hiring for that going forward. And they have Roadmaster out for hire for job announcement, but then we need to work on the surveyor portion of Bill Gilly's position, because he's currently a 1/10 FTE surveyor. So, and I think that's all I really need to go over. But there's a lot happening in Public Works.
There's always a lot
and
happening.
it's super
in Public Works.
exciting.
A lot
Yeah.
happening out there. Just quickly, yesterday was AOC Day, and it was a 7 a.m. till 3:30 marathon. There are a lot of bills that will impact counties, so it's important that we're there to defend the counties in any way that we can. Also been in discussions with the United Way. They're interested in a youth shelter in Newburgh. And so we're going to be talking to all the different players like Youth Outreach, YCAP, and ADEC has been very generous with that suggestion. So talking to United Way about how they might fund something maybe this part of the county. Also, there is a bill that has been introduced in the legislature, and it has to do with the reporting of psychiatric medication for foster children, which, as many of you may or may not know, has been it's been difficult to get that information. The state is not really wanting to turn that information over, and we've got a 5 times higher incidence of foster kids being on psych meds than the general population of children. So that, I think, is going to be big, along with some of the other hopeful improvements to managing child welfare. So that, with what we're watching at the legislature, it's going to be a very interesting next
really
several
will be.
months. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we can go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks.